Hey, Proxies. What's happening? I realize it's been a little while, but I got caught up in some life stuff. Gigs, traveling, enjoying my family, catching up with friends and whatnot. Well, balance is a mastery. And I thought to myself, what am I going to talk about on my next podcast? And the answer came to me when I got to see a movie about a person some might call the ultimate idol. I don't know if any of you have seen Michael, the new Michael Jackson movie, but I highly recommend it. It is incredibly entertaining and inspiring, to say the least. And it inspired me to share a few run ins that I've had with people that I spent a lifetime studying. Some of my biggest influences, and yes, you could say they were my idols. So stick around for the good, the bad, and the awkward moments that led me to meeting the goats of the music industry right here on the Proxy Principle.
The Proxy Principle.
We all have those people that inspire us to become something great. What is it about them? Is it the way they look, the way they carry themselves, or the way they sound? What is it about them that resonates within our beings? Why are we so attracted to them? Is it really that person or the person that we think they are? Is that who we become obsessed with? Or is it actually what they inspire within us that we become obsessed? I knew from a very young age that I wanted to perform. But what did I want to perform? I was a gawky kid and somewhat of a goofball. Still am. I loved writing and casting school plays. I loved singing in talent shows and in front of our congregation at church. I loved performing in comedy sketches. The comedy stuff felt really good to me. So exploring the performing arts became second nature. Growing up in the 70s and 80s was a blast. It was full of colorful choices from movies to music, and I felt like I had so much material to draw from, to mimic, to aspire to, and that's how I would hone my craft. I had what I considered to be limitations at the time due to my parents monitoring every single thing that I did. We were super Christian, so there was a lot that I couldn't listen to or watch compared to some of my friends, especially when I was really young. But my parents knew that I loved music. I was around 5 years old when my dad decided to get himself a new state-of-the-art stereo. So that year for Christmas, he built me my own little entertainment center to house his old stereo. But that didn't matter because it was new to me. So while I was downstairs opening Christmas gifts with my mom, my dad was assembling everything up in my bedroom. When they told me I had one more gift, but that I had to go upstairs to my room to open it, I didn't know what to think. Lo and behold, there was this little media console furnished with a stereo on the bottom shelf and a turntable on the top. Speakers on both sides that came up to my waist, and they completed the gifting with headphones about the size of my head. Oh, and along with that new stereo, they gave me an album of the man that would teach me how to sing. As a matter of fact, from what he told me, he wrote the songs that made the whole world sing. He wrote the songs of love and special things. He wrote the songs that made the young girls cry. Barry Manilow wrote those songs. I played that album over and over again. I made up little dances to all of those adult lyrics from the album, This One's For You. The choreography that I made up to complement those big production numbers, it's burnt on my brain. It was only last week that I discovered that he indeed did not write most of those songs on that album. That being said, the songs that he sang on that album still dwell within my soul to this day. They're part of my being, and he set the tone for the genres of music that would become favorites in my not so distant future. One of my friends that I met around those preschool years would become very familiar to me because we would be put in classes together from kindergarten to middle school. And I learned that she liked music and movies as much as I did. We had a lot of weekend overnighters together. It was a lot of fun. She played piano and we both sang, so we would sit and sing together for hours while she accompanied us. We stayed at her house most of the time because she had a way cooler movie and music collection than I did. So, yes, we watched a lot of movies too. Things we probably shouldn't have been watching. Her parents worked a lot, so we pretty much did whatever we wanted. I remember going through a phase of watching things that really scared us, but the coming of age films were all the rage. And the Brat Pack, well, they were widely celebrated in that time period. Movies like The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off were totally rad. But one that really got me was St. Elmo's Fire. But with that movie, it wasn't just about the storyline. What hooked me was the music. That soundtrack was written and produced by none other than hitmaker David Foster. Although at the time I didn't know who David Foster was, I just knew that I loved the sound that set the tone for that film. The music from that movie drew me in, which would also explain why I would fall in love with music from artists who were popular right around the time that movie came out, such as Chicago, Shaka Khan, Kenny Loggins, DeBarge, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Olivia Newton-John, because David Foster had collaborated with these artists, whether he was producing and or songwriting, and that's only scratching the surface on artists he'd worked with. Well, there was another artist whose music hit me hard that year. When I heard her debut single, You Give Good Love, in 1985, that was it. That was the music. Whitney Houston was the voice, and yes, it became my sole intention to find out exactly who Whitney Houston was. I wanted to sound like her. I wanted to look like her. I wanted to be her. My friends used to make fun of me over my obsession with this young woman and her ability to sing. They would say, Candi, you're going to be lying on your therapist's couch saying, but I am Whitney Houston. My parents gifted me with a VHS tape, yes, I still have it, of all of her videos from her first album. And I would study every move she made. I would buy clothes that looked like her. I cut my hair to look like hers. And I would stand in front of this huge 4.5 by 5.5 foot mirror that my parents put in my room. And I would practice all of the time. I wanted to nail every note. No one was going to tell me I couldn't. The first time I performed outside of church as a soloist with no choir behind me was my sophomore year of high school. I sang in a production that was a spoof of the David Letterman show, and it was open to the public. You had to buy tickets to attend, and my high school had one of the finest stages to cut our teeth on as young performers. Now known as McHale Performing Arts Center, this auditorium seated a little over 800 people, and for this performance, the place was packed. I happened to be the musical entertainment for the evening, and it was definitely confirmation that I was on the right path. I had quite a few family members sitting in the audience, and a lot of my classmates were sitting out there too. When the intro for I Want to Dance with Somebody started, the crowd went nuts, and my friends were screaming my name. That's when I knew there was nothing like it. Needless to say, I'm sure my religious family members didn't know what to think when they heard my 16-year-old self singing about wanting to feel the heat with somebody. And what I didn't know is that this performance would be the summoning of a lifelong journey pursuing a career in the entertainment industry. They say that success occurs when opportunity meets preparation. And my parents knew how badly I wanted to perform. So they did what they needed to at getting me the best tools, the greatest teachers, and experiences that would prepare me for a career in performance. I practiced a lot, and it wasn't hard because I loved it. I even loved competing for solos and choirs, for leads in musicals, placing first in state competitions, and so on. It built the confidence that I needed because as I mentioned before, I was this goofy late bloomer who was also a religious freak, and I got made fun of a lot. But my music, you could say it saved me because I knew I was good at it. Music was always my friend. By the time I hit college, I won a scholarship for music performance and had been rated in the top 40 vocalists nationwide as an opera singer under the age of 36. Still, I enjoyed the pop genre more than any other. It was 1990. That summer was hot before I left for college, and a little movie that came out that same summer made it sizzle even more. The movie was Pretty Woman. I loved it, and so did everyone else, because it was a box office hit. It had the highest number of ticket sales in the US ever for a romantic comedy. At the time of its release, it was the fifth highest grossing film of all time worldwide, behind only E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Star Wars, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Jaws. It was also the highest grossing R rated film of all time, surpassing Rain Man, until it was surpassed by Terminator 2 Judgment Day in 1991, but remained the highest grossing R rated film released by Walt Disney Studios, surpassing Cocktail, holding the record for 34 years until Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine surpassed it in 2024. I saw it multiple times in the cinema until I could quote every line. I also made daily calls to my hometown movie theater to make sure I had first dibs on the actual movie poster from the theater's marquee. I wanted the real deal to be the centerpiece for all eyes to see on my wall in my college dorm room. And it was. This classic poster featured two stars, Julia Roberts with that wide, expressive smile, her messy red ringlets donning that black tank top dress connected with a hoop loop to a black skirt, bangle bracelets, and let's not forget those iconic thigh-high boots as part of her signature look, back to back, with the sophisticatedly dressed Richard Gere in his timeless gabardine suit, playing off of his hair, evoking that sharp, useless look he had in this romantic comedy. Just your typical Cinderella story when a Hollywood hooker meets a high-class billionaire lawyer. Putting the cherry on top of this poster is the title Pretty Woman in a dynamic hot pink compacta typeface font with a fluorescent yellow shadowing, vertically sliding down the right side of the movie poster facing Julia Roberts. And here's a small but interesting pop culture detail you may not know. Richard was a silver fox in the movie, but his hair was black in the poster. And Julia's dress in the movie, as we're introduced to her character, Vivian, is not wearing pink and black. She's wearing a white tank top connected with a hoop loop to a blue and white C-patterned skirt. Why the changes for the poster? We may never know. A bit of trivia I do know is that although the actual filming of the interior shots took place on a studio set, most of the exterior scenes were shot at the Regent Beverly Wilshire. And if you know the movie, it was referred to by Kit as the Reg Bev Will. This hotel served as a key backdrop as the visual landmark for this romantic story. But one thing that left more of a mark in my memory from this motion picture was the smashing soundtrack. It carried a lot of 1980s style, even though it came out in the 90s, and still transports me to this day. It included artists like Natalie Cole, David Bowie, Go West, Jane Wiedlin of the Go-Go's, Roxette, Robert Palmer, Roy Orbison, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and we can't forget Peter Cetera. Why? Because guess who collaborated on Cetera's song? And I knew it the moment I heard it. David Foster produced it and co-wrote it with his then-wife, Linda Thompson. This is one of my favorite soundtrack songs of all time. But anything he touches, I know it. And this soundtrack was on repeat for me over the next couple of years. If you want to listen to it now, you either have to buy it or listen on YouTube because the streaming platforms don't include all of the songs from the album or their different versions. Anyway, as I mentioned, it was the early 90s, and one of my college buddies introduced me to another soundtrack of a movie that I had seen a few years before, and I loved this one too. Was it because it starred Mark Harmon and Jodie Foster? I mean, they're pretty great actors. Was it the melancholy storyline, Remembering First Love? The movie, Stealing Home, upon the film's release, failed to resonate commercially or critically, but David Foster's score for the film was widely celebrated. With television reruns and DVD releases, the film attained a cult classic status. I happen to think the soundtrack had something to do with it. David's music always struck a chord with me, so this is when I really started looking into what else he had done. This was before the internet, so I'd actually have to go to the music store to search. I can't help but to nerd out on this shit, so just bear with me. One of the albums I found was The Symphony Sessions, which had been released in 1988. Another one, which became an instant favorite of mine, was River of Love. And this album also came out in 1990. It straight up felt like his classic 80s soundtrack musical styles, which included both upbeat tracks and emotional ballads, showcasing Foster's versatility. It highlighted his collaborative approach by using various artists. It also featured a new song he wrote at the time called Grown Up Christmas List, which has now become a holiday classic. An album that came out not too long after River of Love was the album titled Recordings. It had a unique spelling and featured reinterpreted versions of his hit songs that he produced for artists like Boz Scaggs and Chicago, Earth, Wind and Fire. You get the idea. And last but definitely not least was an album that had come out in 1986 that was primarily another instrumental, but it did include some vocal tracks that David himself sang on, one featuring Olivia Newton-John. I don't know why he didn't sing more. I really liked his voice. It was his voice, along with Marilyn Martin, on the song And When She Danced, that made that soundtrack from Stealing Home so magical. These albums weren't as mainstream as St.Elmo'sFire, but David definitely had his fan base, and I was definitely part of it. Although all of his music was hitting it out of the ballpark, for me anyway, by my sophomore year of college, I was hitting burnout. Partly because I knew I didn't want to be an opera singer. So why was I working towards that? I wanted to be a pop star. And how would I become a pop star if I stayed in Indiana? I could stay a big fish in a little pond, but that would not help me achieve my goals. So, with the encouragement of my college professor, who happened to be the head of the music department, I left school. I wasn't quite ready for New York or LA yet, but a friend I had sung with in clubs introduced me to an opportunity working at a youth retreat center in Panama City Beach, Florida. There, I would work as a vocalist in a band entertaining the youth that would come through there for summer camp. It was one of the most fun summers I've ever had. I made a lot of really good friends there. I also met my first husband. Becoming a significant other at that time was very hard for me, and him for a whole plethora of reasons. I would say the biggest was cultural differences. I was from northern Indiana, he was from southern Louisiana. Although we both came from Christian homes, our upbringing was a bit different from one another. That was partly what attracted me to him. We couldn't get enough of each other in the beginning. We were so in love. And it was distracting from what at least I had been working towards. I'm sure for him as well. He made me want to switch gears and become his wife, or at least that's what we thought at the time. We dated for a few years after the summer we met in Florida and then got engaged. We were trying to figure out ways to make money, and we would decide that he would become my manager. At the time, we lived in southern Louisiana. So he started hustling to get me out in front of crowds in New Orleans. In parallel to our upcoming wedding, there would be another union made by my favorite artist and my favorite producer. They would create the best selling soundtrack album of all time, with sales of over 45 million copies worldwide, winning the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. The lead single, I Will Always Love You, achieved unprecedented worldwide success, selling over 24 million copies worldwide, and is the best selling single by a female artist of all time. I mean, how could you not put a spell on the world when you have the GOAT of producers, David Foster, collaborating with the greatest singer of all time, Whitney Houston, at least as far as I was concerned? And that song would be my way forward in booking live performances. I was very familiar with both of their styles, so getting this song in my body would come easy. I recorded it, and my manager husband shopped that recording to get the gigs. I was hired with a local band and played local bars and clubs. I did Sunday brunches, weddings, and we booked a few Mardi Gras tableaux. And yes, every show included my performance of David and Whitney's I Will Always Love You. It was always funny to me that people would request that song for their first dance at weddings. It made me realize that people don't ever really pay attention to lyrics because that song is basically a bittersweet farewell. It's about conveying appreciation and love while acknowledging the need to part ways. Who would have thought that that song, in so many ways, would define my life in those moments? Maybe we manifested it. I mean, our wedding was nearing and our relationship had taken a turn. I don't think either one of us knew how to get out of it, so I painted on a smile and walked down the aisle, and we went through with it. I'm not going to lie, the wedding was beautiful, and I still thought he was too, but he just didn't feel the same way about me anymore, and I knew it. And although the music was gorgeous, it's almost as if the music we chose was a mirroring of the movie it came from. We had more people tell us that they felt like they were at a concert rather than a wedding. How could it not? It was candlelit, a Christmas wedding. Red roses and pearls were dangling from spruce greenery, and candelabras were everywhere. We had a children's choir, a few pianists, and a soloist who performed music from David Foster's soundtrack, Stealing Home. It really was a wonderful memory, but it was bittersweet because it was the opening act of our demise. We tried everything to make it work. After about a year of struggling through our marriage, we separated and moved all around the country to see if a change of scenery might remedy things. He worked on movies in Orlando, and I joined a cover band that played the Marriott circuit. This band traveled from one side of the country to the next, and my husband would come out on the road with me, sometimes between jobs. Ultimately, I knew that he just wanted to be home. We decided the band was just a band-aid, so I left the band. And we settled down in Nashville, Tennessee together to see if we could get things back on track. But being closer to one another actually pulled us further apart. There was no evidence of us ever getting back to the way we were. I was so depressed, I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror. That confident young woman that I had known was gone. And when we split, I had to start from ground zero. It probably sounds like we were vapid young people, and in some ways, we probably were. But I did love him. We were just lost. Keep in mind, I'm giving you the cliff notes on the relationship. It was way more complicated. But this story is more about idols. So I'll stay on point on how my idol's movie music has been a vehicle. I had the blessing of having the help of my family to move through this difficult time, but I was embarrassed and insecure, and I was broke. I would have to start over, and that's hard to do when you're disheartened. Thanks to my parents and being in Nashville, I would have more opportunity. For one, I was in the Bible Belt, so there was no shortage of the Lord. He was on every street corner in that city, and he still remained in my heart. And let's not forget the fact that Nashville is Music City, USA. After working in a few restaurants and waiting on a slew of musicians, songwriters, producers, etc., I made quite a group of friends who really tried to network me into more opportunity. At the time, though, I absolutely had no interest in becoming a country artist. I did, however, date the president of William Morris Agency in Nashville on and off. It was never serious, but he was a really good friend to me. He knew I wanted to be a pop artist, and he had some major connections. So he sent some of my pop demos off to David Foster in La La Land. Needless to say, I never heard anything, and nothing was popping for me in Nashville until I decided that I would be making the move to Los Angeles. Isn't that the way it always goes, though? As soon as you don't care, they come a knockin'. I gained some interest, and I got my first record deal through a new indie label that was moving to the West Coast. Ironically, the label was called Movie Music, and I was their first artist to be signed. But not long after moving to LA, the offer fell through because the label went under. It was short lived, so I had to find work. Besides working as a singing hostess at the oldest Italian restaurant in Los Angeles and doing background in TV and movies, I got a job as a lead vocalist in a wedding band called Rembrandt. This band kept me pretty busy. We played almost every weekend, usually in Orange County and LA areas. They knew who my idols were because I was still obsessing over them. Well, my boss got a call from a potential client whose daughter was getting married, and he calls me to tell me that he wants me to go have lunch with this client in Calabasas. This was odd to me because he had never called me to meet with clients before. He always just got the booking, and all the bandmates would show up and do the gig. I don't remember if they had requested to meet me because they saw me in the video or what, but he proceeded to tell me that they were friends with David Foster and that David would be attending the wedding. Yes, I would be glad to attend lunch, and I will do whatever I can to accommodate these folks in securing the deal. This couple seemed super excited to meet with us, and they were so nice. There really wasn't anything I had to do at the luncheon. It was just a meet and greet with some very lovely people. And yes, we got the gig. So now I would prepare. But how? First, I would get the assignment and make sure that all songs requested by the bride and groom were seasoned and flawless. I would then make sure that any songs David Foster wrote or produced that were included in the band's set list for that evening were honed beyond already being part of my body. The big day had arrived. I was nervous. Who am I kidding? I still get nervous before every show. But this day, I would be performing in front of one of my idols. I had to look right. I had to sound right. What if, don't even go there, Candi, just breathe is what I was telling myself every 5 seconds. This is someone's wedding, Candi. It's not about you, is what I had to keep reminding myself of. Hey, it may not have been the way I had dreamt of it happening, but nonetheless, I was going to seize the day. I had a whole morning between getting ready and driving to the venue to vacillate on the good and the bad that could happen. Obviously, the band had to be there a little early for sound check. I would have sound check in two vicinities because I was not only asked to sing at the reception, but at the ceremony as well. And this special day would take place at the Bel Air Bay Club, perched above the California coastline between Santa Monica and Malibu. It was a somewhat overcast afternoon with a chilly ocean wind blowing. All of my performance dresses were sleeveless, some spaghetti strapped, some strapless. So my choices of apparel were more than limited on keeping warm. Because, of course, The bride and groom chose to exchange their vows on the bluffs, overlooking the backdrop of swaying palms, lapping waves, and lush gardens. Yes, we were outside. I was shaking already due to nerves, but the cold gusts would not be helping my vibrato in any way, shape, or form that day. As requested, the band leader and I sang the soon to be married couple's request of a song originally performed by Celine Dion and Andrea Bocelli. We had performed it at many weddings before, but on this day, we were performing it preceding the wedding processional and in front of one of the song's writers and producers. The song was called The Prayer, and due to the cold, my vibrato was in double speed. I sounded like a goat. Let me clarify, I wasn't the goat. I sounded like one, though. Some people are into that. I'll refrain from naming a few artists who have those kind of voices who have done very well for themselves. We all know who I'm referring to, but note to self. Never go to perform knowing you will be performing outside without a jacket or a coat again. And I never have. I've always been prepared. But I still had a whole night to perform, so I had to let go of beating myself up and getting back into the game. I had a few moments while the nuptials were taking place for me to gather my thoughts. When the wedding party recessed the guests to a cocktail hour, I made my way to the 1920s Mediterranean-style mansion just up the hill. Thank God the reception would be taking place indoors. I took a restroom break, grabbed a few waters, and headed to the stage. The bandmates were tending to business as usual, though I was feeling a little tense, and they knew it. A few tried to distract me, but I wasn't having it. I had to stay focused. Looking back on it now, it really was silly, but I was in it to win it, and the winning for me was intense. The downbeat of our first song ushered the guests into an elegantly decorated room framed in romantic flowers. The views of the Pacific Ocean beside us sparkled in the sunset as it spun its golden rays to warm the room, setting the tone for the evening. The band played easy listening in the background as the guests dined upon contemporary cuisine, and after the toasts, it was time to dance. So the tempo sped up as the lights went down. After a few sets of boogie, my bandleader, Doug, made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege to have amongst us a multiple Grammy-winning producer, songwriter, arranger, composer, etc. Please help me in giving a big hand to Mr. David Foster. And the crowd cheered. My heart was pounding. I had no idea what would happen next. David Foster took his place behind our band leader's keyboard. And as the sound team turned up the mic, he greeted everyone with a hello. No stranger to crowds, he then owned them by milking the room with, "Did you ever get the feeling that the moment has passed for me to get up here and do one of my bullshit love songs?" The wedding guests, of course, they were laughing and they were like, "No, no, come on, David, come on." And he's like, "'Cause the band is so hot and everybody's drunk, which they should be, and everybody's having a great time. It was a beautiful ceremony and a beautiful reception. How do I get up here in front of the piano and do one of my stupid songs? It doesn't even make any sense." Of course, the crowd's carrying on with, "Whatever, David, come on, do your thing." And he goes on to say, "So I think maybe what we can do is something from The Bodyguard that I did, and with a little help from Candace, or maybe we'll try a little medley. We're not rehearsed." And he looks at the band and says, "But we do seem to have their attention, so shall we?" And I say yes, and he says, "Okay." As David searches for the right sound patches on the keyboard, David's microphone clip insubstantially twisted, causing his microphone to flop upside down. While he's trying to accommodate the device, obviously the mic is limp, and David asks the mother of the bride, "Betty, does this remind you of anything?" The room explodes with laughter, and the band, we're all just shaking our heads with embarrassment. I personally went into full spin mode. David gives me the first note. I don't hear it at first. He plays it again, and I start the melody. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. While doing so, the tone is good, but I am somewhere between zeroing in on the note and right underneath the pitch. I was trying to balance the high emotions of singing with my idol and nerves, as well as never having sung this iconic anthem with this band that I had been singing with for a couple of years. And if we had ever performed it, it had been a while. I remember continually telling myself to breathe. It was all I could do to pull any air support up from my diaphragm in this moment. But I had to deliver. David was leading me with somewhat of a piano accompaniment through what would usually be an a cappella intro, and with the help of guests encouraging me with their exultation. I felt like David trusted to just let me go in that moment as he conducted the band to gently come in on, and I will always love you. And I somewhat pulled myself together through this thin pitchiness and just went with it. It was what it was. It wasn't bad. I just could not for the life of me control the intensity of my emotions. I was singing with David Foster. My voice went back and forth between strength and tears. Our saxophone player came in for the sax solo. I had time to inhale and exhale slowly to expand my stomach a bit. Right when the music was starting to swell and just when I felt like I might have the capability of releasing full vocals, don't you know, that stupid mic clip fell again, making a loud crack in the middle of the song, which made everyone laugh once more. All that was left was for the volume of this ballad to diminish and for the band to nail that show-stopping drum hit, escalating that stunning crescendo. It got quiet, and I heard David count the drummer Jamie in. I'm going to count 2, 3, and you hit the tom-tom on 4. 2, 3, and Jamie hit the tom, and I nailed the note, and the crowd cheered. And when I realized I hit the note, I soared almost throughout the rest of the song. I retreated back to this frenzied emotional state that absolutely knocked me out of being able to finish the song as confidently as I normally would, because I was trying not to cry. Yes, as Randy Jackson would say, you're pitchy, dog. But as pitchy as it may have been, it was also passionate, and the crowd stood as their praises roared. Oh, but we weren't done. Apparently, because David complimented with, "Great job, Candace," while the guests' praise continued. So did David by saying, we're doing so good. We're doing great together. I then suspended the conversation by interjecting, "Would you want to do And When She Danced?" He said, "Oh, that's interesting. I probably don't remember that song, but I'll tell you what we could do, because with this crowd, I guess we could do maybe one more ballad, and then we'd have to do like a dance song, right?" He arrested the discussion with, "I wrote a song about 25 years ago." As someone from the audience yells, "Yeah, probably before she was born." And he agrees, "Yes, probably before you were born, Candace. But it still gets a lot of action. It's called Got to Be Real. Do you know that song?" I said, "Yes." And he was like, "You can do that? Okay. Should we just do that?" The crowd cheered us on. The horn players know it and everything. And you can play it in the key of E flat, modulate to F, and the whole bit. And then the mic clip flopped down again. And David says to the bride's mother, "Betty, couldn't you have gotten a proper mic?" And Betty was hilarious when she answered, "David, I can't get it up." David says, "Of course you can't. Your shit's so old and tired, Betty. I swear to God, the same line every time." I don't know, maybe you had to be there. But the crowd was laughing their asses off. And so was I. Just then, our band leader inserts himself from the side of the stage by announcing that we do the song in the key of F. David looks at us while fixing his mic and asks, "You do it in F? No, that's not possible. You mean, and then you modulate to G? Is that true? Why?" The room got quiet. David gathers himself and says, "Okay." David shows our bandleader what he just explained. Then Doug, our bandleader, plays a chord and said, "Well, what's this?" Which is what David originally said. Our bandleader said, "Oh, it starts in E flat." David says, "Thank you very much. A 1, 2, 3, ba-da-da-da, 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 ba-da." The band was immediately in sync with David. And if you don't already know this, the guy commands attention. I just happened to be experiencing this with him on stage, and he allowed me to shine on this one. This song had everyone on the dance floor, but what was really fun is how David had control of each musician in what they would play, as if he was the puppet master, including where he elongated the original breakdown into a lengthier arrangement. And he brought us all back together to end the song. It was all so surreal. At the end of the evening, I was eager to thank David for the opportunity to perform with him, as it was one of the top highlights of my life. I was able to speak with him and Linda Thompson, his then wife and co-writer of the song that I had suggested that we perform. He mentioned that I was familiar to him. I didn't specify that I had auditioned and got a call back for his show Pop Stars a few years earlier. David had been an executive producer for the Warner Brothers series where he helped create an all-girl band and participated in the recording of their debut album. It was kind of like American Idol, but it hit American television before Idol did. I did note that Nashville's president of William Morris had sent him my promotional package a while back. David said he never received it, then asked if I happened to have one with me. I said, yes, I do. So I excused myself to grab it and handed off my demo, personally, to the one and only David Foster. That night left me disproportionately excited, and I lived on that high for the next several weeks that would follow. That was the first and last time I ever engaged with him. I did have one of the songs from that demo on hold for his future wife's album, Catherine McVie. This info came from my co-writer of that song I speak of, Larry Weiss, who was also the writer of Rhinestone Cowboy. But nothing of that song that I gave to David Foster ever came to fruition. I still adore David Foster to this day, as do all of his fans, I'm sure. And that was an evening that I will never forget. I'm ready to move forward, but today's deep dive has only been part of my journey. So today, I'll leave you with that little song that I handed off to David Foster that night that I met him, that night that he invited me to join him on stage. I can't believe it's been almost 30 years since I co-wrote and recorded this song. Sit with it. Sit with some of the ideas we've explored together. Drop your thoughts in the comments on whatever platform you're listening from. I genuinely love to hear your perspective. There's still plenty more to unpack in the next episode, so be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. I'll meet you right back here next time as we continue exploring how our idols can become our angels incarnate on the Proxy Principle. I'm Candi Rands. See you next time.
Anoint this room with oil before we enter in. Whatever happens here tonight shall not be a sin. Take me to your heart, that secret place feel these walls come down gently to the floor. I feel you breathe me in. I feel me wanting more, never like before. Anoint this room with love. My eyes will not deny the essence of your face, silently and still, lost in your embrace. Anoint this room with oil, anoint this room with love, anoint this room with oil, anoint this room with love.